Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of On the Horizon. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I'm here with Eric Collette. Eric, how's it going?
Very good.
How's
Oh,
the world of VMware treating you these days?
it's very sparkly. There's a lot of movement, a lot of change.
Yeah.
I see big things on the horizon. Whoa,
Oh, that was a pun. Is that a
that
pun?
wasn't intentional, but I will take it. I will
Yeah.
claim it.
That's an easy one. The On the Horizon, man. That's an easy one to sneak in there every once in a while. I do think that I'm seeing a lot of uptick from people talking about you guys on the end user compute side of things, whether it's anything from antivirus to the networking capabilities you guys now have, and even things around virtual desktops. Sounds like you guys are making some waves.
Yeah, there's a lot of motion around that anywhere workspace piece. I think we brought it up a few times ago, but anywhere workspace is really making a lot of noise. I see it happening.
Well, and the world needs it.
Yeah, it's I mean, we've changed. Everything has changed. It's not really what we wanted, but it's what we have.
Not what we wanted, but it's certainly something that we're somewhat prepared for. I think in large degree we were prepared for, and it's accelerating what needed to happen anyway. It's it's kind of like, I don't know, totally. Maybe this comes off very wrong, but I'm gonna try. It's like having an old roach infested house that really just needs to burn down, and you got lucky and lightning struck it, and so now we get to go deal with the damage of it, but also build a new.
Build it from a better foundation. I totally agree.
Yep.
I mean, just what you said about things moving in the right direction. They were going this direction anyway. This sped it along. People working from home is much more common than it ever has been, and it's now widely accepted, whereas it was not exactly before.
And for a lot of people, it'll probably never go away.
Yeah. Oh, guaranteed. Guaranteed.
So I was the guy that used to drive by, cities that were growing, especially here in the South, Nashville, Tennessee, Charlotte, North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, Atlanta for the last decade or five. And you see all these skyscrapers going up, and you're going, well, I don't quite understand. What I'm telling people is you don't have to go to the office anymore. But yet I see people investing in these big commercial buildings. I always questioned it, and I think this is going to cause us to highlight the fact that that real estate that kept going up in value, and I think that's the reason why companies would build these big towers, because they know they could get rent for it, and the value is going to go up. I am now convinced that that was the wrong thing to do at the time, and I'm really concerned about what the economy's future looks like when a bunch of those buildings sit empty in these big downtown areas.
Very, very good point. I mean, we saw a mass exodus from a lot of these really densely populated cities and locations, and people going out into the suburbs. So yeah, you're right.
I think the only thing that really is going to save that scenario is the fact that most Generation Z people, a lot of them like to live in these areas where there's a lot to do and a lot going on. And my wife and I went walking in a place called South End of Charlotte the other day on a Saturday afternoon. And man, there was so much going on, and it made you want to live there. And I think like my parents and probably us, we like our half-acre lot with wooded backyards and that stuff. But I don't think the next generation cares. They want to be where they can walk out their door and stumble their way into a brewery at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday.
Absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't? But at the same time, it's true, and there's a balance between the two. I went to a comedy show, and I went and browsed the city for a while this weekend, and it was a blast. But I was very grateful to come home, sit in the suburbs in a nice, quiet place, and sleep well in a quiet bed.
Yeah, I'm that guy. I want both, right? I want a place in the ocean, I want a place in the mountains, I want a place in the suburbs, and I want that trendy place in the whatever the heart of the downtown area is.
I want it 5 minutes away from each other too. Yeah. Just get, if we can work that out, teleportation, all that stuff. Let's work that out.
Yeah, I'm not asking for much. It's about a minimum $1.5 million in real estate. That's not much. All right, so let's talk about this blog by Gabe Knuth on August 5th of this month, this year. The title of it is Horizon Universal Broker and Multi-Cloud Assignments, Keys to Success with VMware Horizon. I think I know what this is going going to talk about and what we're going to go through here, but help me understand what Gabe's setting us up for here in the introduction.
Well, he is just telling us that there's a new, easier way to handle multi-cloud when it comes to virtual desktop. And it's all about streamlining the imaging process, streamlining the application delivery process. Because we have access to the cloud, we can stick a whole bunch of stuff up there now and then deliver it from a single source to multiple spaces.
Mhm.
That's really what he's setting it up for.
So is this mostly focused on virtualizing desktops and apps from multiple cloud scenarios?
It's basically minimizing the amount of effort that it takes to create an image and then deliver that image to multiple clouds, and then make that experience universal for multiple users, whoever is trying to get to access to a virtual desktop.
Okay. So his next section is titled Brokering Simplified. Kind of walk me through what he's trying to get across to the reader.
Yeah, absolutely. This what we intend to do, we're still in, like, I would say, version 1 of the product, and I'm sure that there are more features that are going to be more elastically built out of this. But when it comes down to it, we have this Horizon control plane, which is where we put our images, we put our applications, and we even manage connections through this system. And then it delivers that image out to each of these multiple clouds. And you can see that Horizon Cloud on Microsoft Azure is one of the premier ones that we have supporting this cloud pod architecture approach. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily, or it didn't support the cloud pod architecture at first, but now it does. And now we can deliver that image up to this brokering system, and it will push it out to the different locations. And then when a user logs in, they basically hit that universal broker. It will by policy determine where to send that individual, which cloud, whether on-premise or off-premise.
So Eric, is this actually saying that the image itself, not just the brokering of the user, but the image itself is centralized and then pushed to the various cloud provider of choice at either ahead of time or at the moment?
It is ahead of time, but yes, you're absolutely right. We build the image once, and because it's going onto a platform that is pretty much universal, it's delivered to each one of those different locations, public or private clouds. And then when a user connects to it, it says, oh, this person is associated with this particular desktop pool. And it spins up that image that's been sent around, regardless of which cloud they end up on.
So is this limited to persistent images, or can it be completely random pooled images?
It can be, I would say anything that works with the just-in-time management platform, based on instant clones, that's the functionality that we're looking for. So it could be either persistent, or it could be this instant clone approach. I would say minimizing it down to a single image makes a lot of sense to streamline the IT activities on it.
Eric, does this require the VMware solution running on top of one of these clouds, or can it be cloud native?
It will be with VMware's infrastructure on top of it.
Okay.
I dare say that this may change in the future, and I will put a TM next to that.
Yeah. Well, in theory, that's the beauty of the VMware solution, having the ability to deploy on top of bare metal cloud solutions, as crazy as that sounds, and then to have this ubiquitous layer across multiple data centers, multiple geographies, multiple companies, all simultaneously. I love the idea that from a business perspective, I may be running VMware on top of Azure, I may be running it on top of AWS, I may be running on top of Google, I may be running on top of all three simultaneously. And if someone wants to, raise their rates on me, I just, spin up more in the other guys and minimize my footprint on the one that went up in price.
Exactly. You basically do cloud shopping at that point.
Right.
And maybe hardware gets really cheap to the point where you buy a whole bunch of hardware and you'd run it on premise for a little bit. Yeah, little infrastructure overhead, but when it comes down to it, you go with what the best price is for the time.
Right. And you can control your destiny of that. It's like, it's like Charmin toilet paper. I buy it at Costco, I buy it at Walmart, I buy it at my grocery store. Sometimes I buy it at the local drugstore if they've got a good price on it.
Yeah, yep. And when it's out of stock, you can find it somewhere. You can find it even at a hardware store.
Yeah. Well, there was this
Enjoy
one
the
time
go.
during the pandemic where you could not find it, but yes, for the most part, you were right on a normal life in a normal world. I did buy RV toilet paper from the hardware store during the pandemic. That was quite the experience. Don't recommend it, by the way.
Akin to sandpaper, that stuff. No.
No, it wasn't like sandpaper, but it didn't hold up very well to the process. I'll leave it.
That's true. The
Very
1,000
flexible.
ply, the 1,000 sheets. No. Yeah.
So this next section here says top-down approach to universal brokering and multi-cloud assignments, collectively referred to as universal broker. First bullet is simplified management through the ability to make one assignment for all environments. Does that mean like one image, one assignment? And I think you've kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. One image can go out there and it can be delivered to all the different locations. Just, for functionality's sake.
And then support for all Horizon control planes, connected environments, including Horizon Cloud on Azure and those currently running the cloud pod architecture. So is it truly limited to Azure at the moment, or AWS and everybody's good to go as well?
Everybody who supports Cloud Pod. Now, Azure did not for some time, and now that's all been set up and it's now direct. So now it's in addition to Azure.
Yeah. Eric, I'm just going to pause for a second. This is an interesting concept here. I don't know if very many players are going to be able to do this. Think about some of your competitors like Citrix. They won't have that play because of the Zen server limitations. It just never got to this level of integration with other places. I guess Nutanix with Citrix, or Nutanix and Frame, but Frame's another conversation. I mean, this really does set you guys up to be a provider for the future in clouds, plural.
Yeah. So, and I mean, we're talking the centralized smart broking, that piece.
Yeah.
The when it comes, just having a single location that is, so you don't need to have global server load balancing in place across the globe, of course. Right. And then you have it managed by policy associated with the user. So there's that layer of authentication. As soon as that user gets to a certain spot, it's like, okay, these desktops are only available in these particular clouds. It's going to be policy based. How do you redirect them to that new cloud? So it's the intelligence of that does make for a really good scenario. Now, high availability and those different pieces, those are things that are in question, but those are all solidifying as we speak. But yeah, it will change the game.
And then this next bullet talks about the end user piece of the story, which is basically you go here and it's all here. You don't care where it is. You don't care where it's coming from. All you know is you go to this one app or this one URL, and that's where all your work is.
Exactly. And as soon as you set that URL up and point it into the universal broker, it again authenticates the user. The user then gets determined, oh, well, they're close to Amsterdam right now, so let's forward them over to Amsterdam. They're traveling in Europe. They have their applications out there. They have their desktop out there. You can even set it up so that there's some folder redirection so that their data is available out there as well.
Right.
Of course, you want data to follow the user as much as possible.
Yeah. And then this comment about east-west traffic being eliminated between the different pods, because, well, help me understand that.
Well, mainly because you could see each pod as being siloed. Mm-hmm. And truly siloed in their own respects. They operate independently, but they do have that image that's being placed out there and running from there. Now, when they leave that environment, they're going to, maybe a cloud, a SaaS-based service, or maybe back to the central office for some information, but it really is self-contained at each pod. They don't have to talk to each other to get information from each other.
I guess there's plenty of conversations at the architect level to figure out what to do about your client server apps and the server side of a client server app. But
Exactly.
you guys are solving the client side, and then how those apps perform in that scenario will be, to be determined per application.
Exactly. Now, it could be that you set up a policy for certain applications and certain desktop pools. If a user wants to get access to a particular application, we have a virtual desktop that sits right next to the database.
Right.
So that client server situation, if you're going to be using this particular application and it needs to talk directly to that database, set up a policy and a virtual desktop that's going to sit in the location that's right next to that database.
Yeah. This next one talks about what you mentioned a minute ago, which is the no longer need GSLB, because you've got this kind of spider webbing effect of this one point that you come into that then places you where you need to go. And if that place isn't available, then it has a number two option that didn't need to be globally served or load balanced.
Yeah, exactly. It's all managed for you, so you don't have to do a lot of infrastructure overhead.
Yeah. This next section of the article talks about how Universal Broker and multi-cloud assignments is kind of like the nirvana that's kind of been lurking out there, which this is all coming together for me as we talk through it. It's always been interesting to say, well, VMware has a hypervisor and that's a little bit of a competitive advantage, but nothing special. Now, when you start talking about data centers that don't belong to you, that you are a subscriber of and a tenant of, but having this ubiquitous layer across all of them, it goes back to my comment a while ago. There's only a few players that are going to be able to even come close to that, and you're the only one that's got both the brokering and desktop piece to ride on top of that scenario where you own the software layer in whatever data center or cloud data center.
Yeah, it's a lot like what we've been trying to do with the VMC on AWS stuff. When I say trying, I mean we have done it, but VMC on AWS, the vSphere on Azure, and so forth. Google Cloud, GCVE, all of those different VMware engines. That was like the first foray, and now we can see this same thing happening with the Horizon Cloud piece. Yeah. But yeah, making it more universal, making it more of a one-stop shop. But it's because we had this really huge, big SaaS-based layer that's sitting out in the public cloud right now, handling a lot of these transactions coming in.
So Eric, I have a couple questions for you. One, play devil's advocate here for you a little bit. Like, okay, so I've got this environment connected to my AWS world. I've got AWS tenants deployed in 4 different geographies where my business runs. Do I really need the ability to go between a bunch of different clouds, or am I just good enough just living in the redundancy world of AWS and the different regions where I've deployed?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you decide really your level of involvement. If you feel like you have a good relationship with your current public cloud and you just want to exist out there, by all means. I think that, again, you said you choose your future. Your future is determined exactly by how much it's going to cost to run the business through that cloud. So yeah, you could live like that.
What if I decided a while back that I was going to work with VMware on AWS, and now I've decided, hey, I want to open up my options? Is there a transition path that gets me to the multi-cloud assignment world?
If really it is, you look at the way your infrastructure is built. You look at your GSLB, or if you do have global server load balancing. If you don't, then you're basically building from scratch, which actually is easier because you don't have existing infrastructure that you need to cut over on. But you start with one environment. You start with one that's being handled by the Universal Broker. You can still point directly to the unified access gateways at the front of each of those different pods.
Yeah,
that you can authenticate that way. So start by initiating a first cloud, and then you can start adding multiple clouds to that universal brokering layer and fill out the environment that way. But it's read through the documentation, go to techzone.vmware.com as well, and there's a lot of the setup about how it works in there.
Yeah. Well, I have to assume this is going to be one of the topics at VMworld 21, right?
Yeah, yep, it'll be there. Just that's free. So join us and leverage XenTegra's link. I'm sure you'll put a link to signing up inside of this blog.
Well, we
And
need to.
yeah,
We need to get that out on our website. We are working on. We actually got a T-shirt printed up today. It says VMworld. Imagine that 21. So we're working on something. My gimmick there is been there virtually, done that virtually, got the T-shirt for real. We're working on a few things, but looking forward to it. And honestly, I gotta be honest, this is the most compelling reason for me to want to sign up and attend. This to me is a pretty big deal, what you guys are announcing here, the ability to broker, not only broker to all the different sites, but actually deploy images across the different public clouds and do that from a central location. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's really, I'm glad to see it happening now. It's been a glimmer on the horizon for, oh gosh, for a while now, but yes, it's now here.
Well, Eric, I hate Gabe couldn't join us for this one since it's his blog, but definitely good content, and I encourage people to, after listening to this, go out and read up and get registered for VMworld and find out more around what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, and appreciate it, Andy.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Have a good day.